Within Mass, as you know, one of the nice thing is that as you bring up a screen here in the Mass 500, you have a lot of different fields available to the system here. You have, your addresses, your contacts, and depending upon what modules you own, you might or might not have the sales order tab, or you might not have the sales order tab. But overall, there's a lot of different fields available here. In addition to that, there are 4, like for example, in the customer screen here, there's 4 additional fields that you can add through the setup. But they're limited in length, I'll be very honest. These are a length of about 15 characters, and there's not very much you can do with that. So one of the things that you should be able to do in Mass 500 is add additional fields. And you're able to do that in the system by using something called Custom Office. And that is the button right up here, or the Customizer button, which is also known as Custom Office. And that, if you own that module, you have the ability to customize screens. So for example, if I wanted to click on this button here, and for example, if there was a field that I don't like on the system, like for example, I don't like the way that they call it postal code, but I want to call it, no offense, zip code, because I do everything in the United States, I can easily save that change at that point. If there's a field that I don't want people touching, such as maybe the vendor ID, I could actually make this unenable it. And so as a result now, if I was to close the screen out, oops, didn't do it right, I didn't disable it as well. If I come back in here, I can also, sorry, let me click on that again here, where it says vendor. Come on, you can do it. And I'm going to make this not visible as well. So as you can see, I removed that field from the screen. So you're able to move things around using Customizer, hide certain things. But one of the other things that we should be able to do is add fields. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of adding a field. The unfortunate thing is that this usually requires a little bit of knowledge with Microsoft SQL. Microsoft SQL Server. This is something your IT department could install for you on your local workstation here. So this is this allows you to get into SQL Server and be able to make any changes to the SQL Server. So there is some danger to this, but it also, I think both of you are very smart that you can easily do it. This is something that, again, if you're using SQL, if you're familiar with it, great. You can also have your IT person install this locally on your workstation. This also is installed, I'm assuming, on your SQL Server at that point. So when we go into SQL Server here, and I'm just going to I'll bring it up what it looks like when you first, in fact, I'll just start it at the beginning here. I had it up for speed performance, but at this point, since there's only 2 of you on the line, I'll start this process back over. When you go into SQL Server Management Studio, what it asks us at this point here when you first come in is, what server are you connecting to? This will be the name of your Mass 500 server that you connect to. And I'm using something called Windows Authentication, which means I don't need to put my username or password in there. And as soon as I just come into there, what I'll see is that I have something called my databases. Databases is where you store all the information regarding Mass 500. So, for example, here, I have a couple different databases installed, and I know the database I'm going to be using today is the Mass 500 74_app database. That's what I named the database. And yes, I'm using Mass 500 7.4 today. So as you can see, it's not that much different, but I wanted to make sure that we use the latest and greatest version. Within the 7.4, so you'll see in my exercise, the very first thing that we want to do is we're going to add a custom field to the customer table, or excuse me, to the customer screen. One of the rules is that if I click on tables here, you'll get a list of all the tables. One of the rules that you want to make sure is that you never, 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 never change an existing table structure without getting permission from ISM or Sage Software. The reason for that is that during an update, that information could get lost. Sage has the right of changing their table structures during upgrades. It wouldn't happen unless it was during an upgrade, but we always want to make sure that we do this the correct way. So what you'll see here, let me resort this by name here. What you'll see is a bunch of different tables, and as you become familiar with Mass, you can find out how to, or with SQL, you can know where all the different tables are. For me, I know the table that we're looking at today is the first table I want to look at is the customer table, the TAR customer table. The reason they call it TAR customer is that the first letter of the name of the table actually stands for table. So T stands for table, AR stands for the accounts receivable module, and then after that is the name of what the table actually does. So if you ever do any crystal reports or things like that, you would actually, this would make a lot of sense. Just for a little bit of fun here, anything that starts with a TAP is obviously the accounts payable module. Some of the other ones that make a little bit of sense are TCI, being common information, and then probably, again, another one that's probably important is TGL. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to my customer table, and what I want to do is figure out how Sage did something called the primary key. So step number one was going into the table there, going into, SQL Server Management Studio, and we're locating the TAR customer table. What I'm going to do is right-click on that and go right into my design of my table. And what this shows me is that there's a little, see how there's a little key right there? That means that that is my primary key. What a primary key means is that there can be no duplicates within the system. So what this shows me is that this is the primary key, something called my cust key, and what they have is something called my data type, is something called an integer. That's a SQL term that basically says that this is how they track the information in the system. So what I have here is my cust key, my data type of integer, and that's what I need to know there. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to make any changes to this table. As I said, we don't change any of the existing mass tables at all. But I'm going to close this out here. And what I'm going to do is right-click and say, give me a new table. And what it does, it brings me up into a little screen here. And what I'm going to do is create a new table called comments. So the way we do that is I'm going to create a field called cust key. And I'm going to make the data type, if I click my little down arrow, I'm going to make this something called an integer. And I'm going to say that I'm not allowed to make this can't be blank. We always have to fill this information in. And the next field I'm going to put in here is something called my comments. And I'm going to make this a something called a varchar. What a varchar means is that that's a text field. So whenever you see the word varchar, those are always used as something called our text fields. And I'm going to make this a length of 30 for right now. And I'm going to allow this to be blank because sometimes you might enter a comment in for a customer and sometimes you won't. So what I'm able to do now is click on the Save button, and it's going to ask me what is the name of this table that I'm creating in SQL. And as I said in my directions, I'm going to call this a TAR, so I'm using the same naming convention as Sage, comments. And for me, what I like to do is whenever I create my own table, I always put the name of ISM at the end of it. That way I know that ISM created the table. I know I don't have that in the directions there, but this is something that I prefer to do. This way, if I ever want to find all the tables ISM has ever created, it's very easy to filter by the last 4 characters, _ISM. So I'm going to save this at this point here. And once that is saved, if I was to come back to my tables, and one thing you'll find about SQL is that you always have to refresh your screen. So I'm going to come back in here and click on refresh, and what this does is that it will list out all my tables again. And I'm going to sort by create date since I'm lazy. I don't want to search for all throughout the information there. And there's my table that I created called tar comments _ISM. The very last thing that I need to do in SQL, and apologize, I skipped, that was steps number 2, steps number 3, and step number 4, and step number 5. The last thing that I want to do here is set the permissions. What the permissions does is that allows me to have people write directly to the table, have users write to this table. Right now, end users would not be able to write to this table because they don't have permissions established yet. So what I do is I'm going to right-click on this, and as I said down below, click on Properties, and I'm going to go to my permissions here. And when I'm underneath there, what I can do is, it's a little unique screen here. I'm going to click on Search, and I'm going to type in anything that starts with App. And if I say Check My Names, it brings up my something called my two security roles. What I'm going to do is say OK, and just like the picture shows me here, what I'm going to do is choose the one that says Application DB role, which is the second one, and I'm going to allow everyone to have full rights down below. What this means is that they can enter in data, they can delete data. So whenever they're doing anything with any of the customers, they're going to be able to enter that information in to the system. So again, I created a table, and now I'm giving the application DB role, that's the internal MAS 500 security role, access to work with this table. And once I say OK there, that's all the work I needed to do within SQL. If there was other fields I wanted to add, I could come in here later and say Design and say, you know what, I might want a table of, like, for example, I'll put in reference, or and I could create I can create more fields if I wanted to. So once I create my first field, which is my key, and then my first field, I can come in here and add as many fields as that I want over time. There's no limit to the number of fields that I can create for my customer table. So we have one client, I think they've created at least 50 or 60 fields on the screen already. So I'm going to close this out. Yeah, sure, I'll save my changes, not a big deal. And so what we're going to now do is come back into Math, and I'm going to bring up my customer screen here. And again, when I brought up my customer screen, I'm going to click on this button called my Customizer. And what ends up happening is we have a little button right here, once this comes up, called my Add a Control. So what I'm able to do with using Customizers, I can add labels. Labels are these type of things like customer class, status, standard industry code. I could add the text box, the mass data box, which are these boxes here. I could add numbers. I can add currencies. I could add check boxes. I can even add calendars to this thing. What I'm going to do right now is very simply click on this first little box that says mass edit, and I'm going to drag. That's a little small. I'm going to put this field right. Actually, you know what? I made a little mistake. It's getting hidden by something else, so I'm just going to delete it. And that's the nice thing. If you ever make a mistake, just delete it and start it back over. There's my box there, and I can type in a lot more there. And what this allows me to do at this point here is that the most important step to this is something called data binding. What this allows me to do is that I'm going to tell it what table am I going to get the information from. Well, remember, we created a table called TAR comment. So let's try this again. TAR comments underscore ISM. I want to pull the data from here. I don't want to pull the cus key, but I want to pull that comments field. So notice that if I had another field, I could have added it to the screen and just simply called a reference. But I'm going to call comments. And then what it's going to ask me to do is to find the relationship between the two, between the comments table and the customer table. And our relationship is always going to be based upon that primary key. So I could drag my primary key. Oops. And this is one of the unique things about it. It's a little tricky getting it linked up the first time. There we go. Click on that. And now notice that I'm saying the two tables are now linked based upon my customer key. I'm going to say save that, link that. And the last thing that I'm going to put in here is I'm going to put a little text box or a little label that says comments. Oops. Helps if I could spell today. I'm sorry about that. So now, if I close this out here, I've now created my own field. I could have made this bigger. I could have put it over here under where I had a lot more area, and honestly, probably would have made a lot more sense to do it over here. But for right now, I'm going to leave it in the main area here. And under here, I'm going to put in this saying this is a really nice customer. And I'm going to Actually, what ended up happening was that it didn't. Let me close the screen out. I realized I had to close the screen out first. So I'm going to bring that customer back up. The reason I did that is I noticed that it was kind of in a gray state where my save button was grayed out. So I'm not sure what happened. And if that ever happens, just close the screen out and bring it back up. So now notice that my save buttons are not grayed out. I'm going to say this is a really nice customer. Say save. And now if I go to my next customer in the list, Aldenbaran, I'm just going to put something else in there. So notice that now as I go from customer to customer, the information down there is saved below. So the nice thing about this system is that you can create a lot of your own fields in many areas of the system. You can add them to customer maintenance, vendor maintenance, item maintenance. The only place you cannot add them is in the lines area. So for example, if I went into process invoices here, and I always believe in showing you visually, I'm going to create a new invoice. Come on, you can do it. If I was to create a new invoice, I can add my own fields to the header area here or the totals, but I cannot add a new field in the lines area. That's the only place I can't do that because it's in the grid area, and I can't use Customizer to modify the grids. And that's the only limitation to this, is that you can't add, using Customizer, you can't modify the grid of a system. So I could add another field here to the invoicing if I wanted to, that allows me to enter additional information into the system if I didn't have that already. So Customizer, as you can see, is one of those neat modules, but it basically allows you to customize the screens, allows you to add fields, change the way things look. But to me, adding fields are one of the most important features within the product.
Stuart, I have one question. So you add these custom fields, then you get a new version upgrade. I'm assuming they don't automatically go across. So the person...
That's actually incorrect. They do go automatically across. They do. Because the way that we did it here, and this is why we did it this way, this table, tar comments here, Sage doesn't know anything about it. So the table and all its data, when you do an upgrade, will automatically come across with no problems. As long as Sage does not make a fundamental change to this screen here, this will stay on top of the program changes. So to answer your question, I have had clients go all the way from version 4.0 all the way to version 6, and their customizations and additional screen fields came across with no problems.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is actually, during an upgrade, it does upgrade with it. So you're changing the database, you're changing the schema, and it does work.
Okay, so your only question would be is if Sage actually formatted something on that screen in the exact same spot as where yours was.
That's one way, or if they completely redo a screen. For example, in version 7, they redid the sales order screen. Now, they haven't done it since then. They're not planning on it. But if they redo a screen again, then again, you would have to re-add the fields to the screen. You would not lose any of your data. You don't have to do anything in SQL. It's all a matter of just fixing the screen after an upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one of the nice things about the customizer, is that as long as Sage doesn't make fundamental screen changes, they come across. And the way they've done that is that anything you make to the screen, these changes are actually stored within the database and sit on top of the program instead of modifying the program. So you have a program, and this screen changes it. And whenever you change a screen, you notice a little asterisk up here. What that means to me is that this screen has been customized by Customizer.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I know. So if any client's saying, hey, my screen's not looking right, or if I look at their screen and it's completely different, if I don't see an asterisk, that means someone hard-coded it, usually not the preferred way, or if I see an asterisk, they've customized it. With Customizer, you can actually make the screens bigger. So if I wanted to take this screen here, and you're saying, well, I'm very limited in space here. Well, not an issue. What we can do is come over here and say, I'm going to make this a width of 850 now, and notice I just gave myself a lot more space, and I can enter to my heart's content a lot of information even over on this right-hand side here. So I'm going to save that, and now whenever I go back into my screen here, let me go back into that screen, maintain customers, and on the right-hand side now that screen should be a little bit bigger. So there you go. So now I can have all my fields over here on the right-hand side if I wanted to.